President Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed concern over the country's high unemployment rate. He says that the ANC-NEC Lekgotla wants government to develop a strategy to ignite growth in the economy that will lead to job creation. Statistics South Africa released its quarterly labor force report yesterday. It says 27.2% of South Africans are without jobs. Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke joins us now in the studio for a discussion on this. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so very much for joining us here on Afro Breakfast, Statistician-General.
Good morning, and again, good morning to the viewers.
Well, you know, unemployment rate, as I said there, has risen by a staggering 27.2%. Take us through these, I suppose one could say, scary results, and would you agree?
Well, I produce official numbers, and anyone in official statistical practice never gets emotionally attached to the numbers. So whether the number is high or low, for us, it's a number. Yeah. We must just make available to the public, because the moment we start feeling that it's scary or we will make only available those that are very good. Yeah. But back to issues is that we have seen a rise from the previous quarter by 0.5 percentage points. Or 0.5 of a percentage point from the previous quarter of 26.7, and which has actually brought us to 27.2 as we are sitting now. And now sitting where we are, we have seen a growth largely in terms of the number of the discouraged work seekers by 77,000 people. We have seen a decline in the number of jobs by about 90,000. And again, those that have lost jobs have also increased by 102,000 persons quarter on quarter. That is from the previous quarter. Now, when you look at that and you come and make a determination as to which sectors have performed badly, particularly, we have seen services have performed badly, that is social services. We have seen manufacturing lost 105,000 jobs. But even with transport and construction, as well as mining, trying to gain jobs, those jobs were not enough to offset the 0.5 percentage points going upwards to 27.2.
Take us through, you know, from province to province. We see that Limpopo and KZN unemployment rates are low. Why, and what can we read into this? And which provinces are sort of the most affected and perhaps will continue to be the most affected? One would assume Gauteng province being the worst.
When we look at the provinces, the Free State has the highest unemployment in terms of the narrow definition. But when you look at Limpopo, for example, it has always been hovering around 18-20%. And as we are talking now, Limpopo is sitting at 19%. Yeah. Then we may not necessarily come to think that more jobs are being created in Limpopo. Because when you look at the expanded definition, the unemployment rate for Limpopo goes higher by more than 18 percentage points. And when you move from just about 19 to about 37 for Limpopo, then you can see that there are a lot of discouraged work seekers in Limpopo. It's the same with KwaZulu-Natal. Yeah. KwaZulu-Natal has actually about 19 percentage points from the official definition to the expanded definition. So you can see that even in KwaZulu-Natal, you have a lot of discouraged work seekers. And discouraged work seekers are people who have looked for employment for, the rule is, it's called 4x4. You need to have looked for employment for 4 days, for 4 weeks continuously. Yeah. Now, there are people who have looked for employment for whatever reason. They didn't have enough money, or the distances were far from where they are staying. Now they couldn't look for employment anymore, and they then fall into the category of what you call the discouraged work seeker. And those are about 2.9 million persons. And when you look at those, in the not economically active, about 40.2% are students, and 18.5% of those are the discouraged, 18.5% are the discouraged work seeker. So Limpopo and KwaZulu-Natal, while it may look like they are low, when you look at it from the official definition, when you look at the expanded side, then you see their challenges.
All right, let's bring in Marius Croucamp, who joins us on the line. Then he's the Deputy General Secretary of the Metal and Engineering Sector of Solidarity. Mr. Croucamp, thank you very much for joining us here on Afro Worldview's Afro Breakfast.
Good morning.
Well, you know, the Statistician-General doesn't want to give me his emotional views on the stats that he released when I asked him whether these statistics are scary or not. He said he's not going to speak about that. So I'm going to ask you then, throw that question to you. Unemployment rate risen by, I'm saying, a staggering 27.2%. Do you agree? And do you believe that we're really in crisis mode at this point?
Well, certainly, I'm prepared to say it's scary. It is a crisis at the moment, and some of the figures we've seen on the ground are not reflected in the stats in July. Looks even worse. So the next quarter didn't start off well as well.
Now, you know, one of the things that the Statistician-General raised was that the issues that the sectors that experienced the most loss were social services and manufacturing. What do you say to that, particularly being in that sector of the metal and engineering sector of Solidarity?
If one looks at the 105,000 job losses in the manufacturing sector, mainly contributed to base metals, food and beverage, and tobacco. It is a reflection of where the economy stands at this moment. We've seen from the union side a drastic tick up in the amount of retrenchment notices in the last few months, and those retrenchments are getting bigger as well, larger retrenchments, and there are many, many processes. So the industry is really, really under the stress.
Now, what can this be attributed to then? Where should, I suppose I'm asking you, where should the blame be placed? Are we blaming it on the private sector? Are we blaming it on government? Where ideally is this sort of blame? Where should it be directed, I suppose, if there is blame to be placed?
There's a few factors playing its hand here. I think government policy at this moment is not really investor friendly, and we've seen basically a stalemate of investments coming into the sector. The raises in taxes, fuel costs, employers are saying to us that fuel costs is really starting to hit them very hard. And there's just a general loss of sales. A few external factors on the metal side. We've seen the Trump U.S. tariffs have a small effect, but significant enough that almost no alloy metals left the South African borders to be exported to the U.S. in June. So it's a combination of factors, but in general, the economy and policy of government that's hurting us.
All right, you know, you've spoken about what the problem is, and, you know, you raised the fact that the country is not investor-friendly. One of the issues I'd like to discuss with you is the issue of solutions then to this crisis. In your view, how should or what should government do, or change, which policies should be changed to turn the situation around? I mean, I don't know if companies can help the fact that they have to retrench, for example.
We've seen in general that companies retrench as a last resort, so they've implemented various other measures. But we need to see a more business-friendly environment, because if business can thrive, then there's more employment. Employers and companies are finding it very difficult to expand in this environment, so they need policies from government side to make it easier to employ people, but also to do business. And it's a complex issue. However, I think we are already starting to initiate discussions within the metal industries to get everybody together around the table and then approach government to see what we can do, because we've been seeing the stats and we are very much concerned.
All right. Well, Mr. Maluleke, here there, Mr. Croucamp saying that they are very concerned. You did not want to give your emotional take on the issue. But if you can take us into your confidence, please, Statistician-General, what, you know, you've spoken to me about the discouraged work seekers. And I think at that point, I'd like to ask you, how do you sort of conduct these studies and these research and these numbers that you have to crunch? How is that done, and how do you get to that point of figuring out where are these discouraged work seekers that you speak of?
As you have seen, that we have actually tabled what the provinces are saying. So we go to about 30,000 households. So we go to places where you and I live.
Yeah.
and we engage the members of the public from their households. So there are about 30,000 households representative of the entire society, to your high-walled suburbs, to your informal settlement, your farm workers. You look at it, rural communities. We go to everyone because we have a responsibility to report on the entire society. Now, when we go and ask the questions, we want to know whether people have been looking for employment in the 4x4 rule, that is for 4 days and for 4 weeks in a row. And if you have been looking for employment, then you are unemployed. And if for reasons that you are not looking for employment and you are already working, then we categorize you in amongst those that are employed. Now, we also have young people, because the Labor Relations Act says you can look at ages from 15 to 64.
Yeah.
Now, we also have young people who are too young to go to work, or they are still at school. That's why in the non-economically active, you also have those that are about 40.2% who say, I'm still a student. Even if I'm 15 years or 16 or 17 years or 20 years, I cannot take up employment. But also you have those that are saying, for whatever reason, as a person who is minding my house here, because, and you have a lot of migrant workership in South Africa. Yeah. My husband is out of town working in another province, then I cannot take up employment. But you still have another 600,000 who are saying they didn't look for employment, but they are prepared to take up employment if employment was presented to them. So if you look, we have already spoken about the 27.2%, which accounts for 6.1 million persons in the country. Now, when you add the 2.9 million persons that are discouraged work seekers, as well as the 600,000, you come to 9.6 million people. And that 9.6 million is represented in the 37.2%, which then makes it the expanded definition of those that are not employed. Right. So that's how we conduct
I'd like to stay on the issue of young people and the fact that it seems they're not being absorbed into the job market. Have you seen this being a situation where, and I'm obviously now going to ask you in terms of numbers here, has it been a sort of steady decline in terms of youth unemployment, or is it, sort of up, down? What does it look like if you were to look at a graph? What are we looking at?
Young people, and we are looking at young people 15 to 24 years for purposes of comparison with other countries. But we also look at those young people as our country as a policy that tracks young people as in terms of 14 to 35 years. But because the Labor Relations Act doesn't allow us to include those that are 14 years in the employment. Now let us look at young people 15 to 24. It doesn't matter whether they are educated, whether they are graduates or not. It doesn't matter. The unemployment rate for graduates, for example, who are 15 to 24 years, is about 30%. It's slightly more than 30%. And for those with less than matric of the same age band, 15 to 24 years, is sitting at 56.9%. Yeah. Now, generally, young people are affected by unemployment the most in South Africa. Now, when you look also at the same band, 15 to 24 years, there are about 10.3 million young persons of that age band. 3.3 are not in employment, education, and training, and they constitute about 32.1% of that. So, and if you expand that to even 34 years, 15 to 34, you have about 20.7 20 million young people of 15 to 34 years. About 7.8 million of those are not working. Now, other than youth, also women. If you look at women, particularly your black Africans in general and coloreds are affected by unemployment the most. But black women, black African women are affected by unemployment than any other percent of the population group, sitting at 33.2%. So relatively, these are the numbers that we look at.
All right, Mr. Croucamp, let me just bring you in to wrap up our conversation. You hear there the issue of youth unemployment, a very scary one. In terms of the metal and engineering sector, what ideas would you have in terms of bringing in the youth into those sort of employment sectors? Because it does seem that this is a dire situation, particularly for the youth.
I think the most critical component there is quality artisan training. We've seen from our own statistics that artisans who are well trained at reputable institutions actually find jobs and they get well-paid jobs.
Yeah.
So it's very important that we accelerate those programs and make sure that we encourage people to actually go into industry and become artisans. It's well-paying jobs, and they can themselves also, with that skill that they've obtained, become employers and employ people, and we've seen that as well. Artisans employing themselves, other people. So that's how we can assist.
So I suppose I'd then be asking you then for your reaction. We just had the MEC, Banyazari Sufi, here in studio with us talking about the launch of 25 specialized schools. Of course, there's an aviation school that was just launched yesterday and a school of nuclear. What's your reaction to that? You believe that is the correct path, the correct route and policy that government is undertaking?
Certainly. I think the highest priority in South Africa should be education and training. So we would welcome any such step. I think it's a positive step.
All right. Mr. Marius Croucamp, Deputy General Secretary, Metal and Engineering Sector, on behalf of Solidarity. Thank you very much for your time, sir. And thank you so very much, Mr. Risenga Maluleke, Statistician-General of South Africa. We always appreciate your time here on Afro Breakfast. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.